All right, let's get into all those headlines and more, as always on a Monday. National Editor for The Australian, Dennis Shanahan. Well, thank you as always, Dennis. This latest freshwater poll in the Australian Financial Review today says the PM's rebounding as the preferred Prime Minister, up 5 points since last month. They'll be happy about that, sure, but the primary vote shows the coalition still well ahead. Now, if you factor in Dunkley and I think those private health insurance hikes last week, more power bill pain expected in the coming days, I still think these are pretty tricky times for the PM, Dennis. And I know they've got the budget. I know they're banking a lot on the budget. But if you go too hard on handouts, you risk inflation spiking all over again, don't you?
Yes, well, I think Labor would be pleased with this result. And Freshwater's often picked a trend. It's one of the earlier polls. And I think what it's showing is that Anthony Albanese's personal support is recovering. Now, this is very important, and this has taken 3 months, more than 3 months. And this started in December. Anthony Albanese realised he was in trouble. His personal support was going down ahead of the party support. And now, after 3 months and $105 billion in tax giveaways, he is actually starting to get back some of that personal support. The government will be happy, but, and it's a big but, their primary vote is still below, in this poll, what it was at the last election, which means it would have a minority government at best. There has to be more improvement on the party vote. The Prime Minister's vote has improved. It still has to improve a lot. And the Coalition's primary vote, up just 1 point, but just enough. It's 1 point now of having a 4 in front of it for a primary vote. Now, it needs more than that, as it did in Dunkley in the by-election, but I think that the government will be happy with the way things are going, but there's a lot more to be done, and there's still more ground for the Coalition to make up.
And let's not forget, at the last election too, 7 out of 10 voters did not vote for the Prime Minister. I mean, it was a heavy vote against Scott Morrison, but Labor's primary was exceptionally low. Let's go to these revelations today about Stephen Jones, because if you thought Tony Burke was bad last week when we found out he spent $57,000 for 4 days in the US, the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, $43,000 over 8 months for Comcars. Now, that might sound reasonable. You think that's the only way he's got to get around. Well, no, he gets on planes and charges the taxpayer. He's got a taxpayer-funded car, or certainly a vehicle covered by taxpayers to drive around in. But on top of that, he gets himself a hire car to take him between his electorate in Shell Harbour and Parliament House. When pushed on this, he won't even explain why he's doing this. Now, honestly, I am tough on this stuff, Dennis, as you know. The bloke should drive himself down there, or he flies and commutes some other way, or gets on a train maybe. But I mean, who in the government, Special Minister of State maybe, Prime Minister's office maybe, who is watching this stuff? Because these MPs, they are literally taking the proverbial from the taxpayer with this stuff, because it's not an isolated case. It's a real pattern now.
These are the things that really annoy voters, particularly during tough times. A failure to explain why you're doing something makes it worse. And the question is, why is the Prime Minister's office or the Finance Minister not leaning on this and saying to everyone, make sure you can justify what you are doing on these travel? All this travel comes out. It's not secret, and it comes out. And the sort of thing, like when Bronwyn Bishop got a helicopter to a golf course, finished her off as Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Yes, well, one trip. So these are the things that annoy people enormously, and the government has to be careful, because no doubt there'll be more like this come out, and they are going to have to be able to say, we are doing something, at least making people explain why they're spending the money they are.